Imagine a society armed with just the most profound, blinding moral clarity in the universe. A society that perceives these really deep ethical truths, but then, violently destroys itself simply trying to communicate them.
It's a pretty heavy concept.
It really is.
Hmm.
Today, we are looking at this brilliant, staggering sociological autopsy that's disguised as a sci-fi premise. It's an excerpt from a work called The Radican Paradox, Truth Lost to the Fury. So for you listening, we're examining this humanoid species called the Radicans, and they find themselves sharing their home planet with humans who migrated from Earth sometime in the distant future.
And that shared living space, it provides the perfect friction for this whole analysis.
Oh, absolutely.
Because by placing humans, with all our very familiar flaws and compromises right next to the Radicans, we get this incredible masterclass.
A masterclass in things going wrong.
Exactly. And how a civilization with the absolute highest of ideals can just collapse entirely under the weight of its own righteousness. It really forces you to examine the mechanics of belief.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to grasp the mechanics of how the Radicans failed, we have to recognize that their tragedy is, it's completely tethered to their greatest strengths.
Yeah, they didn't fall apart because they were foolish.
Are malicious, right?
Yeah.
They unraveled because of this intense, biological drive for justice and order.
Right. Their defining characteristic was a state of moral intensity that humans simply cannot fathom. Like, it's beyond us.
It really is.
The Radicans operated with this profound emotional absolutism. They possessed an evolutionary adaptation that literally made them visionary.
Like they could see things we couldn't.
Exactly. They could perceive ethical failures, societal cracks, systemic injustices, long before anyone else could even sense a problem.
Especially the humans. We were just oblivious.
And so the Radicans produced these bold, uncompromising ideals because they could see the trajectory of, a minor injustice snowballing into a massive catastrophe.
It's almost like an extrasensory perception.
Yeah.
But, instead of seeing ultraviolet light or something, they see moral decay.
That's a great way to put it.
And their warnings contain genuine insight. They were spotting these microfractures in the foundation of their shared society while the human colonists were, still admiring the paint job.
Right. The humans are just happy to be there.
Yeah.
And for the Radicans, their emotional absolutism meant every single ethical breach, regardless of the scale or the intent, triggered a massive internal alarm.
So like a stolen piece of fruit or a structurally corrupt government institution, it's all blaring at 120 decibels in their heads.
Both are treated as equal emergencies.
Living in that state of constant high alert moral panic, that just sounds agonizing for you.
It was agonizing, and it completely destroyed their capacity for reflective dialogue.
Because they couldn't just sit and talk about it.
No, not at all. To sustain a healthy society, you have to be able to sit with discomfort. You need the emotional shock absorbers to tolerate a bit of smoke in the room without assuming the entire structure is burning down. The Radicans fundamentally lacked those shock absorbers. Their intense drive for justice meant they just couldn't modulate their outrage.
And because they were biologically incapable of sitting with that discomfort, their entire capacity to handle internal and external friction was just compromised.
Completely shot.
Which moves us from their internal moral clarity to the stark reality of their communication breakdown. Engaging with different viewpoints wasn't just, difficult for them.
No, it was a literal overload of their nervous system.
Yeah.
They struggled to tolerate contradiction, ambiguity, or just the slow, often messy process of negotiated debate.
Which is how humans get things done.
Right. But for a Radican, someone disagreeing with their perspective wasn't an intellectual exchange. It was an experience of existential invalidation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. And honestly, I have to push back on this premise just a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because, we see humans experiencing existential invalidation over disagreements every single day.
That's fair.
Right. You can log on to any forum right now, today, and find people regressing into tribal defensiveness. Acting like a different opinion on, economic policy is a literal threat to their life.
Oh, absolutely. The internet is full of that.
So is this threat response genuinely unique to the Radican biology? Or are we just looking at a mirror of human stubbornness wrapped up in a sci-fi label?
See, it's a vital distinction to make, and it really comes down to the concept of cognitive firewalls.
Cognitive firewall.
Yeah. Yes, humans get defensive. We are deeply tribal creatures.
For sure.
But for a human, even a really angry, deeply entrenched human, There remains this microscopic sliver of emotional distance between the concept of an opposing thought and a literal physical threat.
Okay, I see what you mean.
We have cognitive firewalls that usually prevent a debate from completely overriding our autonomic nervous system. But for the Radicans, there was zero distance.
Wow.
Their biology offered no firewall whatsoever. They suffered from a condition of wounded idealism.
Meaning they couldn't separate their ideas from their physical right to exist.
Exactly. In their black and white worldview, a pure idea was the absolute bedrock of survival.
So it's life or death.
Every time. If a Radican believed a policy was morally essential, and you disagreed with it, you weren't holding a different perspective.
You were the enemy.
You were an active agent of corruption. You were dismantling the very fabric of their safety.
That is wild.
And consequently, their higher reasoning would collapse entirely, not out of stubbornness, but as an involuntary primal threat response.
Their brains are just hijacking them.
Yes. They regressed into impulsive aggression because their brains were literally telling them they were being hunted.
Oh, man. Walking through life where every single conversation that doesn't end in total consensus feels like a mortal combat scenario.
It's a tragic juxtaposition.
It really is, because they have this soaring intellect to perceive universal truths, but the emotional fragility of prey.
And when you combine profound intelligence with biological fragility, you get a society that has to invent incredibly elaborate defense mechanisms just to survive a basic conversation.
Right. Since they couldn't emotionally endure a level-headed debate without their nervous systems short-circuiting, their language had to mutate.
It adapted to protect them.
Yeah, and the irony here is so sharp for you listening. We watch this alien species fiercely viewing themselves as these noble defenders of truth, just step on the exact same intellectual rakes that humans cataloged centuries ago.
It's so true.
We're talking about the classic logical fallacies, but they're deployed not as rhetorical tricks, but as biological necessities.
Yeah, their maladaptive debate tactics are just a masterclass in how discourse fails when emotion seizes the wheel.
Absolutely.
A Radican deploying a fallacy wasn't trying to win a debate club trophy. They were desperately trying to relieve the immense physiological pressure of being challenged.
So let's take the straw man fallacy. We know it as constructing a fake, weaker version of an opponent's argument so you can easily knock it down.
Right, a classic bad faith tactic for humans.
But for the Radicans, building a straw man wasn't bad faith,
No, it was an emergency pressure valve.
because they couldn't handle the real argument.
Exactly. When confronted with a strong, nuanced counterargument, their nervous system just couldn't handle the live ammunition of genuine friction.
So what did they do?
Their brains automatically constructed a dummy target, a hyper-simplified caricature of the opposition's stance.
Wow.
And defeating that simulation allowed them to feel secure without ever having to expose their core beliefs to actual scrutiny.
That is fascinating. But then, when the simulation failed and someone cornered them with an undeniable flaw in their logic, they immediately deployed whataboutism,
Oh yeah, the classic pivot.
dragging in totally unrelated grievances to divert attention. It's like a fighter jet popping flares to confuse an incoming missile.
That's exactly what it is. It's sensory overload as a defense strategy.
Right.
If the pain of being wrong is existentially fatal to you, you deflect by creating so much surrounding noise that the original criticism just gets lost.
Nobody even remembers what they were arguing about.
Precisely. And it's the same mechanism behind their use of red herrings. Muddying the waters with irrelevant details wasn't about confusing the opponent. It was about confusing themselves enough to escape the glaring, painful light of contradictory evidence.
Just throw in enough chaotic variables until everyone forgets what the initial disagreement was even about.
Yeah. They completely confused moral certainty with moral authority. The intense feeling of conviction in their chest was interpreted as empirical evidence.
And because of that, they completely lacked the instinct for reciprocal debate. Discourse wasn't a bridge to build shared understanding. It was a battlefield.
Ideological threats had to be neutralized.
And when you view every conversation as a battlefield, the transition from metaphorical weapons to physical ones is horrifyingly short. We see the rapid degradation of their society start with language. Nuance evaporates and it gets replaced by accusation.
And accusation devolves into name-calling?
But it goes deeper than just insults, right? The categorization of the opponent fundamentally changes. Opponents are no longer simply incorrect. They become traitors, heretics, or literal monsters.
Because they couldn't distinguish ordinary opposition from active hostility, the mere act of resisting a Radican's idea was processed as proof of deep-seated corruption.
So just by disagreeing, you're evil.
Exactly.